We are on the brink of having a catastrophic water crisis, but this idea could save us or totally upend the world economy as we know it. So kind of high stakes. Right, and if you haven't seen, a while ago, we actually did a deep dive into the impending disaster that is America's rapidly depleting aquifers, which are naturally occurring underground water sources. With the New York Times even publishing this absolutely crazy study that found that many of the aquifers that supply 90% of the nation's drinking water, they're being depleted at a dangerous pace. And not only is that water essential to American life, it's relied on by farmers, who make up the country's most important economic sector, supplying food and other essential goods across the US and beyond. But also because of that, farms are one of the major reason aquifers are being overpumped and running out of water, though it's also being exacerbated by growing cities and climate change. Right, so if we want to have any chance at actually mitigating this crisis, we've got to look at policies that address agricultural overpumping. And that's exactly what's being done in California's Pajaro Valley. Right, it's this region that's located along a 10-mile stretch of Monterey Bay. It's mainly known for its berries, specifically strawberries, blackberries, and raspberries. So it also produces lettuces, Brussels sprouts, kale, and other greens, all of which bring in nearly $1 billion in revenue every year. While you've got farmers all over the country just waiting for the day that they run out of groundwater, that breaking point actually hit the valley nearly 4 decades ago. Right, back in the 1980s, farmers began to overpump coastal groundwater, with that then causing salt water from the ocean to bleed in from below their fields and into the roots of their crops. So to preserve groundwater and stop the state from taking control of their lands, a group of farmers formed a local water agency. And its first order of business was to install meters so that the farmers could gauge how much groundwater they were actually using. Then in 1993, it began charging them a fee of $30 per acre foot to pay for managing and reading those meters, right, essentially a tax on water. And this as the water agency continued to invest millions and millions of dollars into other technologies and systems to more sustainably use water through rainwater capture, water recycling, and more. And while some of those projects have also been paid for by federal grants and loans, the rest of the costs are being covered by money farmers spend to use groundwater. And so as those ambitious projects have ramped up, so has the cost of groundwater. And early on in the process, growers who were used to getting that groundwater for free, they were unhappy with the price increases, with at one point a group of farmers suing the water agency. In fact, they were able to successfully drive down prices for several years, even forcing it to refund them around $12 million from 2008 to 2011. But then between 2012 and 2017, California was hit with its worst drought ever in recorded history, which made it so that farmers had to significantly limit their water supply. So groundwater prices went up in the Pajaro Valley, but they at least still had water, though since then the costs have continued to rise. And right now, the per acre foot cost has grown to $400, which according to the Times makes the valley, quote, one of the most expensive places to grow food in the country, if not the world. But this is the chair of that water agency's board of directors told the Times that the last time prices were bumped up in 2021, there was actually very little protest. And that's likely because this whole experiment has been seen as widely successful, because the money that farmers spend on groundwater brings in $12 million each year alone, with that money then getting used for investing in groundwater restoration and conservation. And to that point, a recent study on this model identified a direct link between having farmers pay for groundwater and successfully conserving it, specifically finding that a 20% increase in the price of groundwater brought about a 20% drop in the amount of groundwater that was extracted. So because of that, plenty of farmers have come around to accepting that these increased costs are actually necessary if they want to keep farming in the valley at all. And beyond that, the region's absolutely thriving economically. And again, this despite the high water prices. Right, it's the home to the headquarters of some major brands like Driscoll's, which is literally the largest berry supplier in the world. Martinelli's is also based in the valley, which is where it grows most of the apples for its famous sparkling cider. And so with all this, you have experts saying, hey, what they're doing in the valley, this water buying system, it should absolutely be copied by growers facing an impending groundwater shortage in the US and beyond. Especially because, like we talked about in the first groundwater deep dive, the federal government has done fuck all to address the crisis. And when it comes to the states, they have this messy patchwork of differing laws. In fact, according to Felicia Marcus, a former chair of the California State Water Resources Control Board, only a few other regions have set groundwater fees for farming. And what we're seeing in the Pajaro Valley is that it's cutting edge, saying they're way ahead of the curve. And it's gotten a lot of attention, with Brian Lockwood, the general manager of the water agency, also telling the outlet, we get calls from all over the state. How did you get this going? How did you get the growers to agree to it? This is better than the county or the state coming and taking control. And by now, this is something that's solid. It's been tried. It's survived lawsuits. And all that was echoed by Driscoll's chief executive, who also said in an interview that he absolutely considers this a model that can be replicated. And adding, water can't be free anywhere because you can't run a sustainable water supply without pricing it. That would apply to the globe. But then you have people on the other side of this, where you also have plenty of experts who say that there are significant barriers to actually implementing this policy on a bigger scale. Where first and foremost, new taxes, they're just unpopular. That is just a political fact. Then you also have some concerns saying, hey, these systems, they actually benefit big multinational corporations that can afford to shoulder the expenses over small independent growers. And what's more, and this is the big hitter here, requiring farmers to pay for groundwater at a large scale could turn the economy upside down, triggering huge changes for both producers and consumers like you and me. Because when growers have to pay for water, the increased cost gets passed on to the product and the consumer, which can make the farmer's goods less competitive in the market. The big corporate growers who sell premium produce like berries, berries and lettuce, they can afford to absorb the extra cost because grocery stores and consumers will still buy their goods even when the prices go up. Which notably, when you had farmers in Pajaro Valley, they either shifted to growing high-priced products or they just left the region altogether to find cheaper land. But those numbers, those economics, they don't apply to cheap commodity crops like cotton, alfalfa, corn, or soybeans, or things that are necessary to make animal feed and a number of other goods like textiles. Without going into like a whole Econ 101 lesson, the market is generally seen as not willing to pay as much for those commodities as it does for premium crops. So you have people arguing if fewer people are producing those crops, it creates a scarcity. In fact, the Times even reported that in some parts of the country, pricing groundwater could spell an end to current crops altogether, with some experts specifically pointing to producers of Texas cotton, which notably is being grown using water from a depleting aquifer. And the impacts of what's coming already or any changes we try to make, they're going to be huge, not just for the US, but globally. Right? Like with cotton, the US exported more of that than any other country in 2022. And the US is also a huge supplier of other commodity crops, making up 32% of soybean exports and 23% of corn exports the same year, which is why you have some saying, this is a classic and painful catch-22. There is going to be change, there is going to be pain. Whether it's taking action or inaction, it's going to have an impact for everyone, but especially if you work in the agriculture industry or live in big farming towns. But hey, as we continue to get closer and closer to that cliff's edge, I'll pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts here? What do you think, and why? Are you just a consumer? Are you connected to the production of things? I'd love to hear from you.